Before I get to these 5 accelerator actions, I have 2 words of encouragement for all of you. And my 2 words of encouragement are, embrace simplicity. It's been my experience over the last 11 years that really hardworking, really dedicated, really committed individuals subconsciously want to make things really complicated. Because when things are really complicated, it feels more like work. And I've seen people achieve really good results with simple processes, and they think to themselves, if I'm getting really good results with this simple little process, then I'm going to get amazing results with a complicated process. It usually doesn't work that way. I'm going to encourage you folks to embrace the idea that a simple process of 2 to 7 steps is much more powerful than a complicated process. Because with a simple process, you can use it faster, you can teach it to other people faster, and they can use it faster. Another benefit of developing accelerators throughout the organization is you will attract and retain more talent. Great performers want to be with great performers. And a third reason on an organizational basis is that you will attract and retain more customers. More dealerships will want to do more business with TFS the more accelerators that you have in the organization. More consumers will want to do more business with TFS. On a group basis, when you're part of a group, whether it's a DSSO or a CSC or back in Torrance, when you're part of a group that's accelerating, it's like being on an NCAA Final Four team. It's like being in the Super Bowl. It's exciting to be a part of a group like that. And on an individual basis, one reason to be an accelerator is lifetime employability. Thomas Friedman wrote a book last year called The World is Flat. It's one of the 2 or 3 most powerful books I've ever read. It was 469 pages, small print, no pictures. It took me about 6 months to read the book, but it's one of the most powerful books I've read. One idea in that book really stood out for me. Thomas Friedman said there's a difference between lifetime employment and lifetime employability. He said 30 years ago, the best companies in the world would focus on providing lifetime employment for their employees. He said that's no longer the case with the rapid changes in the marketplace. He said today, the best companies in the world focus on providing lifetime and enhancing lifetime employability. In other words, the best companies in the world today focus on enhancing the skills, the competencies, and the knowledge of their employees so they are employable no matter what happens in the marketplace. See the equity in branding. Last summer, I had a meeting in Chicago. I live in St. Louis. I had a meeting in Chicago at 8 a.m. the next morning. And so I set out to drive the 300 miles from St. Louis to Chicago. And if you're wondering, why would you drive 300 miles as opposed to fly from St. Louis to Chicago? I just have 2 words. O'Hare Airport. Enough said. So about 150 miles into my trip, a very important question popped into my mind. I did pack my jacket and my shirt in the car, didn't I? I looked to my right, no jacket, no shirt. I looked to my left, no jacket, no shirt. I had managed to leave my jacket and my shirt in the car, in my closet at home. Now, if you're wondering, how can a person drive 150 miles and not realize that they don't have their jacket and their shirt with them? Let me just say it's one of my special characteristics. My wife used to think it was very cute when we were dating. She used to call me the absent-minded professor. Today, she no longer thinks it's so cute after 11 years of marriage. So I drove for about 5 more miles, and I realized that the meeting was going to start too early the next day at 8 a.m. for me to get to a department store, and I was too late to drive back home to St. Louis to make it back to Chicago at a reasonable hour. So I drove for about 5 more miles, and then I thought to myself, the most logical solution that I could think of. I decided to call Nordstrom's. The Nordstrom's on Michigan Avenue in downtown Chicago. So I called the man and I said, sir, I've left my jacket and my shirt at home. Is there any possibility that you could get a jacket and a shirt ready for me and have it pressed when I come by to pick it up so that I can be ready for my meeting tomorrow? He said, I don't think this is going to be a problem. What time will you get to the store? I said, it's going to be about 9:30. He said, our store closes at 9 p.m., but I'll keep the store open for you, and you can just stop in and pick it up when you get here. I said, really? I called 2 more times on my way to Nordstrom's that night for directions.
When I finally arrived at 9:25 and walked into Nordstrom's, I went up to the person and said, "My name is Dan Coughlin," and I called a little while ago. Someone said they would have a shirt and a jacket ready for me. A man who was back in the background fixing some clothes on one of the aisles there came up to me and said, "Oh, Dan, I was waiting for you. Here's a cold bottle of water. I just thought you might not have a chance to get anything to drink before you get here." He said, "Here's the jacket, here's the shirt. Let's try them on and make sure they fit." They looked great. They fit perfectly. He said, "Here are 2 more shirts that I think would go with that jacket. What do you think?" I said, "I'll take them." Now, why did I spend $1,000 that I did not need to spend that night, and I did so happily, and why did I think of Nordstrom's? 3 years earlier, I had been at Nordstrom's in St. Louis with my son Ben, who was 3 years old at the time. And I had had 4 or 5 pairs of shoes polished, and I went to pay for the shoes, and the man behind the counter said, "Can I help you?" And I said, "That would be great." I thought what he was going to do was he was going to pick up the shoes, put them under my arm so I could hold on to the bag of shoes and hold on to Ben's hand at the same time. What he did was he picked up the bag of shoes, he walked through Nordstrom's, he walked out into the parking lot, and he put the shoes into the trunk of my car so I could hold on to Ben's hand. So 3 years later, when I was in a jam and I had to think of a solution, the very first company that I thought of was Nordstrom's. Do you see the equity in branding? When you provide extraordinary service to your customers, the very first person that they're going to think of when they're in a legal jam is lawyer referral and information services. By providing extraordinary service, you don't know who the Gabby customers are going to be. I've now shared these stories about Nordstrom's with about 5,000 people through my newsletters and through my speeches. But when you're giving great service, you don't know who the customers are that are going to tell other customers. And so this is the point about branding. A brand is the perception of value that a customer thinks they receive when they buy from an organization, or a prospective customer thinks they're going to receive if they do buy from that organization. A brand is a perception of value that a customer thinks they get when they buy from an organization, or a prospective customer thinks they will get if they do buy from that organization. The stronger your brand is, the more likely you are to get the calls from the type of people that you want calls from.
Review past successes, preview future successes. The best way that I know of to strengthen self-confidence is to review your past successes and preview your future successes. To review a past success, there are 5 questions to answer. What was the goal that you were trying to achieve? What were the obstacles that stood in the way? How did you persevere? What did it feel like when you achieved the goal? And what lessons from that experience can you use right now in your current situations to drive even better results? I'm going to give you a quick example of a past success story. 21 years ago, right now, I was 24 years old. I was the head soccer coach at DePaul University in Chicago. I was one of the youngest NCAA Division I coaches in the country. And for that great big fancy title, I was paid the enormous salary of $4,200 a year. And so I had to have another job. My degree was in mechanical engineering, but I had to have a job that would let out by 3 o'clock because soccer practice started at 3:30. So I took a job as a high school math teacher. Now, when I started out in high school math teaching, I was very, very naive. I was very innocent and idealistic. I just assumed that all the students were going to work very, very hard, and we were going to have a great experience, and everybody was going to look back on it with fond memories. So I walked in my first day as a high school math teacher, and I looked at my group of students, and I said to them, "My name is Mr. Coughlin. But if you would like, you can call me Dan." Now, I don't know if anybody in this room has ever been a high school teacher, or if you have any aspirations of ever being a high school teacher. But telling your students on the first day of your first year that they can call you by your first name is not a very good idea. This was an all-boys high school on the south side of Chicago. And when I walked in and I looked at that group of boys, they looked